Welcome back to the ICO Show. I'm David Siegel. Today we're going to talk to another two projects, one of which has finished. And remember, this is not legal or investing advice. This is just for information, and we're here to learn about tokenomics. I'm joined first by Jamie from Horizon State. They've already had their ICO, and let's learn about it. Welcome, Jamie.
Hey, David. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So where are you, first of all?
I'm in Cyprus. I'm in a hotel room. As we sort of discussed offline, it's crazy here in terms of internet access. The Wi-Fi here in the hotel is worse than the 3G, but it's a beautiful spot in Limassol, I believe it's called, which is a town on the coast in Cyprus. And for those of you who don't know where Cyprus is, it's sort of in between the Turkish borders and borders of Israel, sort of situated in that part of the ocean.
Hold on one second. I have to check this. I'm not happy with my QuickTime. No, it's recording. Okay, we're good. I'll keep going. So you're in Cyprus. Why are you in Cyprus?
I'm here for Decentralized 2017. It's a big international conference. It's the first in what will be an eventually very long series. And there are people here from all around the world, all corners. There's some other people from Melbourne, here, Australia, where I'm from, and lots of people throughout Europe, some from the United States. So it's quite a gathering.
Great. So tell us about your project first, so we get the basic elevator pitch.
Sure. Well, it's called Horizon State, and ultimately what we're looking at doing is sometime into the future playing an important role of eradicating corruption in our electoral and other democratic processes. And we're doing this by having built an unhackable ballot box. So utilising distributed ledger technology, it actually turns out to be an almost perfect solution for the storing of recorded votes and recorded opinions in a way that can't be tampered with. So really powerful stuff, really profound stuff. It's the first time in history that something like this has been possible.
Tell us about it. I'm very interested.
It sort of all kicked off about 2 years ago. I started working with a movement in Australia called MyVote, spelled M-I-V-O-T-E. Mm-hmm. Amazing constitution and some really fantastic ideas about how to improve our democratic processes. And part of what MyVote wants to accomplish is having a conversation with a citizenry, a constituency with regularity and immediacy. And to do this, it wasn't really viable to think about setting up polling stations or sending out postal votes for every single policy issue that they wanted to engage people on. Too expensive, too slow, as we know, because those are the current processes. And so it was clear we needed to find a way to make internet voting finally an option. And having done a lot of research in blockchain and crypto assets and cryptography in the lead up to that, it was sort of just like a light bulb moment. It's like, well, if we utilize the blockchain as a critical piece of this solution, then we're able to actually look at doing that for the first time ever. And so my votes run 4 votes across the nation in Australia, and now we're looking at commercializing this tech around the world, speaking to global NGOs, to multinational enterprises who want to use it for everything from directors' votes to engaging their international membership on sensitive matters such as spend allocation, and of course, the electoral process as well. So speaking to some developing nations, both in Southeast Asia and in the Middle East, some states in the US, some states in Australia. So it's exciting times.
So tell us how it works.
So effectively, in simplest terms, we are retrofitting a blockchain transaction to represent a vote. So if you were to query our smart contract, you can see the tally of votes, you can see which way the vote is headed, but importantly, we don't send any identifying information along with that transaction. So what is public and visible to the whole world is the vote itself, is the tally of votes, but not the identities of those who have voted, which is a really, really important piece of the puzzle. And of course, in respect to the concept of disintermediation, while we are still working with government to improve their efficiencies and their processes, we are taking the control away from the institutions and the governments in respect to the record. So now this is kind of like a digital ballot box that is owned sort of by everybody. It's not owned by any individual or institution.
Is it on the Ethereum blockchain?
It is, yeah. So our token is an ERC20 token. We're using Ethereum at the moment, and the primary reason for that at this stage is the size of the network. There are about 25,000 full nodes around the world, and arguably the larger the network, the more secure the network, and that is incredibly important when you're talking about.
Let me understand. to vote yes, do you send a tiny amount of ether to a certain address? That's the yes address, and then there's a no address, or how does it?
So the way it's currently set up in our MVP, and look, this may change over time, but at the moment we have an address for each vote, and the characteristics of that transaction can be queried through the smart contract to understand whether it was a yes or no. Now, look, we are still early days, and so whether that will be the method that we, currently sort of create this process may change, but that's the way that it's working for my vote right this moment. But we are about to effectively go back and rebuild now that we've concluded our ICO, taking a fresh look at how the system works and looking for improvements as well.
What do you have? Is it on an iPhone app?
No, it's a responsive web app, so it works in a similar way to sort of my other wallet.
Right. Okay. And so you log in, I guess, with a password, right? How do you establish your identity?
So that's different for every jurisdiction. It's different for every company, every country. And the reason for that is quite deliberate in that what we didn't want to do is go off and try and create some kind of universal identity solution. Because this means we go to a government and we say, hey, we've got this unhackable ballot box, but also now you need to identify your citizens this way, which is a hurdle that is too high for most to jump.
Sure.
However, if we can go to them and work with them in an ad hoc basis, then that's going to be a much quicker speed to market for us and a much easier solution to adopt for them. Now, an example is that in Australia, the Australian electoral roll is provided by the Commission, the AEC, and so that is effectively our eligibility list for electoral voting. And then we have identity mechanisms such as Green ID or Australia Post, who actually are able to consume, ingest pieces of identification that a user might take photos of and establish that identity with high degrees of accuracy with regulatory approval already used in many sensitive industries such as wagering and lotteries. And then for us, it's about marrying those two up. So we've established identity, we match it to eligibility, and then they have access to participate in that poll or that vote or whatever the case is. But for companies, yes, sometimes it's as simple as a username and password. If they already have that process in place, then we leverage that.
So a person would go and put in his postal address, or in the United States, a social security number, some kind of an identifying number, and then the goal then is to use attestations to verify that, so that not everybody so they can't double vote and use somebody else's.
So what we're trying to move away from is stations. So we're trying to not only decentralize the technology, but decentralize the process.
Sure.
The voter apathy is a big problem, and part of the problem is, in fact, a lack of convenience. If you are somebody who's not tremendously well informed, or you feel your vote doesn't matter, then you're far less likely to want to go down to that polling station and cast your vote.
Sure.
If you can do it from your pocket or your computer using a responsive web interface, then you're probably more likely to do so. So we think we can actually increase participation with this technology as well.
So, but how do you identify yourself without the double vote casting? How do you validate people who are who they say they are?
So, for example, using those example businesses and technologies in Australia, you would be taking photos of government-issued ID, and then that's automatically checked against government records. And if your identity is established, then you're given permission to vote if you're eligible, based on that eligibility match up with the Australian Electoral Commission as well.
It just seems like doing this for how many people live in Australia? 20 million?
Yeah, 25 million. Yeah.
So for 25 million people, not only do they have to send their picture of their passport, but you have to verify that their picture matches that picture.
So that verification process with tools such as Green ID is all automatic. It's very rarely that it has to go manually to a back office.
Great ID. Great ID.
Green ID. Green ID.
Green ID.
Green ID. Yeah.
Green ID. And they help you do that.
Well, they're one of the providers. So there are many identity sort of partners that we were working with both in Australia and around the world to accomplish similar results. And
you've already had some votes using the system?
We have, yeah, for MyVote. MIVOTE is the organization that's already using the tech.
Yeah, and what have you learned from that experience?
MyVote's been pretty successful. They are currently on the move. They're expanding out of Australia, looking at the US and Italy primarily at this stage. But there's been interest about setting up chapters for this MyVote democratic movement in about 20 nations around the world. So there's been a lot of tremendous learnings from an organisational perspective in regards to how to better position staff, what people should be doing, and how to create the right conversations and move into territories in more effective ways. From a technology perspective, it's all been pretty smooth sailing, but it's also been very new for everybody. So everybody involved with the project creating this MVP, which is in use by MyVote, we didn't go off and find existing Solidity developers and smart contract developers. This was new for everybody. So there were some challenging times throughout the development process as everybody got to wrap their head around this new technology. But look, I think the result is something everybody's been pleased with.
What is then the relationship between MyVote and Horizon State?
So MyVote is a democratic movement. They have some very specific ideas in regard to how to improve the democratic process. But they are indeed pushing a very specific way of governing, which I personally am aligned with. But Horizon State is the business, it's the technology. We've been spun out into a separate entity, and it's our job to improve lots of democratic processes, whether it aligns with MyVote's philosophy or not. And so while MyVote moves into territories trying to propagate its improved way of governing, we don't dictate how our customers should govern. So we will sell our technology into the United States government or into multinational organizations or into global NGOs, because there are a few key things which it will just do for everybody, irrespective of how they govern. One, it'll create efficiencies. Two, it'll lower apathy. Three, it'll reduce costs, so on and so forth.
Sure. So MyVote has a specific formula for governance framework.
That's right. And it's non-binary. So for them, it's not about, elections and voting yes or no. It's about understanding the issues that are affecting the country and basically polling the constituency on where they think this country should go in a non-binary fashion. So on the topic of immigration, as an example, instead of saying, do you approve of onshore processing or offshore processing? Instead, you will say, do you want a financially pragmatic approach primarily? Or do you prefer in priority a humanitarian aid approach? Or is border security your primary motivation? Now, all of these things have pros and cons and contradictions, but the idea is to start having a conversation about where we want to see the country going, rather than just a yes or no on a piece of legislation. So this will actually help form legislation.
Right. Okay. Very cool. Tell us then about the token.
So ERC20, and it effectively is the intra-eco system economic unit. It's used for paying fees to cast votes to the blockchain. It's also used for a few other things, a couple of use cases which we're working hard on. And one of them is probably the most profound, is actually constituent incentivization. Now, not necessarily incentivization to vote, although that is one applicable use case, but incentivization to consume information, which will hopefully result in better democratic outcomes. Now, I'll give you a quick example. So with MyVote has an internationally distributed team of researchers. They're from the left of politics, from the right of politics. They're Australian citizens, US citizens, Chinese citizens. It's their job to look at the issues that's affecting Australia and create information packs with, to the best of their ability and in a collaborative sort of environment, getting it to a point that they're all happy enough with. Now, none of them are going to be wrapped with it, because you've got
they want it to be skewed toward their of course.
But this is this is by design, and so the information we end up with is relatively objective and relatively unbiased. Now, it's not perfect. It's not perfect, because information is always interpreted with bias.
That's right.
But it's much better than CNN or Fox News or Today Tonight.
Not Fox News. It's even more unbiased than Fox News? Whoa.
Yeah. So the question has always been, okay, you've got great information. If people read this, it's going to lead to better decisions and better outcomes for everybody. But how do you get people to read it? And for a long time, it's been like, well, we can't get them to read it. We can encourage them to read it. But by utilizing our token in our ecosystem, not just for submitting votes to the blockchain, but indeed for other functions, such as saying, hey, we'll effectively remunerate you for consuming this information, which can lead to better outcomes for everybody. And so it's drawing on the incentivization model of blockchain, period.
It's a kind of gamification. Can you earn enough Horizon State tokens to then cast your vote, so that your vote effectively costs nothing?
Well, the vote, the tokens themselves are not votes, and this is very, very specific.
No, it's a unit of payment for voting, but it's required. But you must pay to vote.
but the people don't pay it, right? The institutions and the governments do. So in the same way right now, the government basically utilises taxpayer funds to send out a postal vote in Australia at the expense of, $122 million.
Yeah. It's very expensive. Yeah.
Instead, it'd be more about them paying us as a business $2 million to run that. So,
I see.
10, 15-fold improvements, and that covers the cost of the votes for the constituency.
So they must pay you. It's kind of a wholesale deal.
That's right.
But they don't pay you on a per vote basis.
They do. We are looking at opportunities for prepayment for specific campaigns, but we can also literally organise things on the fly. So we can tally them up as we go and charge them on a per vote basis. The general pricing model from a business commercial perspective is that they pay a platform license fee.
Right.
And they also pay a fee per vote or a fee per function.
I understand. And that's all paid in your tokens.
Well, they pay us in local currency, Australian dollars, American dollars, whatever the case is. Now, that obviously has an equivalent in Horizon State tokens, but again, in terms of business viability, in terms of speed to market, in terms of widening our adoption, that it's important that we remove as much complexity and as many hurdles for our customers as possible. So when we price up something for a government or an institution of any kind, it will be in their local currency. This does a few things, but it actually shifts risk back away onto us, which is a risk we're willing to take on. So if we're pricing in Australian dollars per vote, then obviously there's a big fluctuation in our token price. We may be earning more or we may be earning less. How far does it eat into our profit margins? These are things that we are constantly working through in regards to
but if you charge 100,000 Australian dollars for a vote, you can take that to the bank. There is no flux. You're not cashing back out into your tokens. You can just use that. So,
no, but we need the HST needs to be utilised within their system, right? So while they're paying us in Australian dollars, HST is utilised as that economic mechanism for the attribution of votes to the blockchain, for incentivisation of constituents, and so if we sort of price up and up on the assumption that HST is 10 cents, 20 cents, and all of a sudden HST is 90 cents, that has an impact for us.
But then you price dynamically anyway because you have to.
Well, we can't, so that's where we have to take some risk, because what our government doesn't want to hear is that we don't know how much their votes are going to cost them.
But if you do everything in Australian dollar equivalent, then even if the price goes up and down on an Australian dollar basis, the price is solid.
Well, their price is solid. The price we're charging them, let's say that we charge them an Australian dollar equivalent of 20 cents per vote. Let's say that HST is, 10 cents. Yeah. That gives us a 10 cent buffer. If HST goes up to 30 cents, then we've just, cut our margins.
But you don't have to, because you can. So you're saying that an HST is always 1 unit of vote or something. But
it has 18 decimal places. When we price this stuff up, we have a very specific price based on a very specific decimal place for that customer based on their local economics. So what we don't want to do is priced completely dynamically, because then this removes the opportunity for appreciation in token price. So we need to make sure that we can increase demand with scarcity to increase the price of the token for our token holders while maintaining a reasonable price for our customers. So it's a balancing act.
But global demand for your token drives the price of the token. It's not specifically based on what people need for one particular vote. It's global demand, right?
Yeah, look, ultimately it's pretty simple supply and demand, in the sense that the more customers we bring on, thus the more features and functions within our platform that are used, then the higher demand the token will be in. Yeah.
Right. It sounds pretty tricky because how much did you raise?
We raised 1.4
million Australian dollars.
Yeah.
So enough to get off the ground, to get a bit more done, but then you're going to rely on, what is your income model? It's obviously you're getting paid for the setup fees, and then you have more tokens that you can release into the market?
No, tokens are now fixed. The supply will never ever change.
Okay.
But we're going to be going to a traditional VC round at some stage next year, because in fact that's where most of our interest has come from. So come next year, we'll have signed a few significant customer deals, which we'll be announcing soon.
Sure.
So we'll have revenue coming in. So hopefully by the end of next year, we'll actually be cash flow positive and making profits.
Yeah.
But we'll also be going to a venture deal primarily for strategic opportunities. And so if we could bring on a venture fund such as Andreessen Horowitz A16Z, that would be significant win for us.
Yeah. Those big guys, they're so important. Yes. name value. We're going to change all that. We're going to change the landscape with equity tokens. So I hope when you get to that point, we'll have our equity token market going. We won't have any, Mark Andreessen says that software is eating the world. It's also going to eat his job.
Yeah, well, look, I think, blockchain's disrupting a lot right now, lots of industries, but it's also disrupting already investment. So something I'm personally really proud of is that our 1.4 mil was entirely from the crowd. We haven't had any institutionals, no funds or firms involved. Literally, that entire 1.4 mil was all from individuals who share our vision for this improvement in the democratic process and eradicating corruption. And, I think it's scaring a lot of traditional investors, and it should. But, if you don't have to go to them anymore and those barriers are low, and we can help, distribute wealth in brand new ways and democratize investment opportunity, then it's awesome.
Yeah, I think Mark Andreessen has enough Ferraris. So I think we can give some of that back to the actual investors. So that's our goal. So tell me how it went down and what you learned from your ICO.
Wow. It's been a stressful few months, hey? Like, I've been involved in sort of startups and smaller projects, getting them off the ground for many, many years now. Raising money, 1.5 million seed round with my last business. And so I've done all this before in a sense, but really not at all. It's been completely new.
Sure.
And it's not just new for us, it's new for everybody. So I don't feel so bad.
Right.
But look, I think some key learnings. One is that if you are going to ICO and you want to raise really large amounts of money. Now, I recommend that everybody be relatively sensible, because what a lot of money does is ultimately makes some people lazy. It breeds bad decisions in others and creates conflicts with others. So set reasonable targets, raise what you need. But if you do want to raise many millions of dollars, you need to be approaching institutional investors, blockchain and crypto-related funds and firms really early, 3 to 6 months before you actually even talk about anything else to do with the ICO process, because it takes a long time to drum up the interest. It takes extra time to do the deals. The other thing that I would recommend is don't underestimate the importance of building a community. So we are a business to business, B2B, right? We sell into governments and institutions.
Sure.
Now, what we thought because of this initially is that, we don't really need to worry about Slack or Telegram because it's not really a consumer-facing product. But of course, because we're raising from the crowd, you still need that community irrespective.
That's your token holders.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. So it's more about sort of investor relations than it is community management in a sense. But we didn't start early enough on that either. So by the time our ICO commenced, we had about 700 people in Telegram. By the time it wound up, we had about 1,400. And when you look at some of the big raises, your Buncors and your Status, they've got, anywhere between 5,000 and 20,000 users in these channels. And so the more people you can have keenly interested in your product, the higher you can potentially raise. And again, this is something that is best done over 3, 6, and even 9 months.
So you could have done that better.
Absolutely. Yeah. The community aspect, the investor relations aspect, we really needed to start building that a lot sooner. We really only started we only fired up the Telegram pretty much as the ICO started, which is tremendously late.
How long did it last, your ICO?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. And what are the 3 things you would do differently then?
Look, I think those two are clear. If you're after institutionals, start a lot sooner.
Yeah.
Irrespective of what the product is, the community building is absolutely critical, and I would suggest anybody, and as would I in hindsight, make sure that that is a process that you start half a year or so before your actual ICO date. The third is actually making sure you have visibility in Asia. This is another place where we sort of fell down. We didn't start getting exposure in Asian press and doing any paid marketing in Asia until the final week of our crowd sale.
Which countries do you mean most? Because China obviously is very difficult at the moment. So.
Yeah. So look, Japan, Singapore, South Korea. South Korea is also very tricky now, but when we look at these bans that have been placed on China and South Korea, this isn't necessarily preventing any investors from sending money, because the process of investing for many of these ICOs is anonymous. There isn't necessarily KYC processes and practices for every ICO, and so there's no real way for the government to stop them investing in a product or a project they believe in. Absolutely, they can start to shut down exchanges and make sure that they're fining or arresting people running ICOs in those jurisdictions, but they can't really stop money leaving the country into ICOs from other places.
And did you do any KYC? Know your customer?
No, so we're based out of Australia. We're incorporated in Melbourne, and the advice that we got from our accountants and our lawyers is that this is in Australia. This is effectively considered a commodity sale. We're selling a utility token, which is more like a commodity than anything else, and so it really is a sale of a product, effectively. And so all we had to do was make sure that we were collecting the Ethereum wallet addresses from contributors within Australia, so that we could pay the appropriate amount of GST, general sales tax.
Sure. But have you tried then going to an exchange and running that money into your bank? Because you're going to need an AML certificate to go into the bank.
Well, to be honest, I haven't looked into that at all. I know that our accountants and our finance guys have it covered, but they've just finished setting up the bank account, so I think it's all good.
Well, from my experience, they don't have it covered at all, and we have $30 million worth of Ether. I think it's 27 today. I hope it goes back up by the time this is on the air. And yeah, it's not hard to get a bank account. What's hard is to get money from an exchange. People should understand this. If you don't KYC your people and you exchange it, it's not hard to exchange. What's hard is sending the money from the exchange to the bank account where you can use it, because the bank has an AML officer, an anti-money laundering officer, who has to sign a certificate saying that this is clean money. And if he says, "So, great, where'd your Australian dollars come from? Tell me about the business transaction." And you say, "Well, we got it from a bunch of people who really love what we do. They're really excited about our token. They gave us Ether." Great, then I'm sure you have KYC information from all those people. You say, "Oh, actually, we don't." And he says, "Oh, then I'm really sorry. I can't sign your certificate because I have no idea if people are money laundering or not." We have 5 or 6 bank accounts, and as soon as we send $50,000 or pounds into those accounts, the red flag goes up, our phones ring, and they say, "Great, I'm your friendly AML officer. I need to understand the source of these funds, otherwise I'm sending them back."
Yeah. Well, look, the advice that we got from both lawyers and accountants here was that we didn't need to do KYC, and we haven't. In terms of withdrawing money to our account, it's something we're already doing. So we're not withdrawing $50,000 at a time, though. It's very much just daily operation.
Yes, wait till your bank sees this video then, and it's really, really difficult. We've heard of many ICOs who have had bank accounts closed because they found out this is crypto. It's not evil. The banks don't care. They like making money. The problem is the AML officer has to sign a certificate, or his or her reputation is on the line. And they want the money, but they have to ask, what's the downside here if you don't have KYC? And in many cases, the AML officer says, "I'm really sorry."
Well, the reason we don't need KYC is because it's just like selling lollies to anybody, or selling video cards, or it's just selling a product to a consumer audience. And so this is effectively income for the business. It's just operating income. Yeah,
we tried that. Yeah, so I'll be interested to hear, you've been able to process 5,000 and 10,000 Australian dollars at a time, right, so far?
Up to 30,000 per transaction.
Pretty good. Pretty good. You've moved 30,000 in from an exchange to your bank account?
Yeah.
And you without a problem? That's pretty good. That's impressive. I wonder if that has more to say about the Australian anti-money laundering laws than than other jurisdictions where I know we've got a lot of problems in the UK and Switzerland, many United States.
Anything over 10,000 gets flagged. That's
oh
as
yeah.
much as I know, though. So if it's over 10,000, then somebody's watching.
Oh yeah. So that's pretty interesting. I'll be interested if you do any larger transactions. Please let me know. We are working actively on this, and we want to help ICOs. And we're setting up an AML a KYC platform, so that once the investor or token buyer is KYC'd once, that person can then buy any number of ICOs through that, and they'll all be KYC'd, and we'll have clean AML. And that's what, at least in Europe, that's what people in the United States, that's what people are looking for at the bank. So,
Gotcha.
So really interesting. Jamie, thank you so much for your time. Fascinating project. Real quick, do you know about range voting?
No, I don't.
You haven't studied range voting?
No.
So
I haven't heard of it.
Okay, so when it comes to public choice and these kinds of choice theory and voting theory, I have written a paper about this, and you and our audience can look at it. It's at votingninja.com, which only cost me $2 for the domain name, so I got that. So votingninja.com will tell you all about range voting, and I recommend that some people take a look at it because it's a really smart way to set up a voting system.
Yeah, okay, cool. I'll make sure I'll have a look as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Jamie. I wish you lots of luck with the project, and I hope if you're in London, come by and let us know how it's going.
Brilliant. Will do. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thanks, Jamie. And today we are joined by Mārtiņš Liberts, who is with the Debitum.network. And first of all, Mārtiņš, tell me about having a first name Mārtiņš. Where does that come from, and where are you?
It's a Latvian name, so it's a Latvian name version for Mārtiņš. So that's in Latvian language you put S at the end of every word.
Oh, aha.
Yes.
Interesting.
So
you were born in ancient Rome.
No.
Oh, okay.
No. I was born in Riga, Latvia.
Ah, okay. So you're in Latvia now?
No, now I'm in Lithuania. I have been living in Lithuania for like 6 years now.
Okay.
And the project is Lithuania based.
Aha. That's Vilnius.
Yes, actually.
You're in. Can you show us Vilnius outside the window or no?
Wait a minute. I'll take a look.
That's inside way out there. Yeah, we kind of see Vilnius. Okay.
It's next to through the next room.
Okay, that's our big tour of Vilnius. Perfect. Okay. Now tell us about your team and how you came to the project and what it is. You kind of give us the elevator pitch.
Okay. So basically what we do business borrowing for small medium companies.
Mm-hmm.
So we allow them to access finance. It's a very huge problem. On global wide, it's like trillions, $1.5 to $2 trillion problem estimated by World Bank.
Mm-hmm.
So we are solving that problem. There are a lot of unique details how we do that by like hybrid solution, community based, so to make it truly decentralized, and by trust ratings and trust smart contract. But it's more interesting how we came up onto the project because I think. The area anyhow will have to be blockchained. It's a blockchain solution will come here.
Yeah.
But it's interesting why we are doing it.
Okay.
So actually, why we are doing it is some 6 years ago we established an IT company and started doing IT work.
Yeah.
And then we had a problem with cash. We had a huge project happening, and we wanted to have a new one, and we needed more money to actually raise developers. Get more developers. So banks did not really give us money because we were young and risky and non-bankable, as to say.
Yeah.
So we didn't get any money, and we thought it's not normal because we were really good. So we should get money, and other companies like that should get money.
Okay.
So we established actually a finance company.
Okay.
That started providing loans to small companies like we were.
Okay.
And so a couple of years ago, we thought about international expansion for that loan-giving company.
Now, is this invoice finance or is this project finance?
Yes. What we do in non-crypto world is invoice finance mainly.
Okay, just so people know, explain invoice finance.
Okay, so what it is, it's like when you write an invoice to your supplier, to your buyer. So what you do, while you are not waiting for the 30, 60 or 90-day period, instead you provide that invoice to us, and we give you money straight away, a bit less than you would get on the invoice.
So you're buying invoices, and you're building an invoice portfolio.
Yes, in a way. And that company, what we do is quite successful. We have 3 million plus in portfolio euros, and turnover. It was 20 million some time ago, but I think it's already 25 million euro. Turnover of assets.
Okay.
So what we understood then, when we thought about going international, we understood that the process is actually rather different in each country, and because we are in Lithuania and I'm from Latvia, so we thought, okay, let's try Latvia as our second international market.
Yeah, it's a big expansion, right?
Yeah, it's neighboring country. It should be like everything should be the same.
Right.
But no,
not at all.
No, it wasn't. And so we quickly understood that that's not the way to do it, not the way to solve the problem for small companies. It's better to try to use decentralized technology and try to combine many smaller providers of those services, financing services, rather than to build a big one. So that's actually how the Debitum.network was born.
So you want to aggregate both buyers and sellers, so little guys can also be lenders.
Yeah, exactly. We want to do it in both ways, and that's kind of the way we look at it. And we basically, the basic principle is that we understand that you need to have local service providers like risk assessment, verification of assets, of situation.
Yeah.
Insurance can be regional, most likely. If you discuss debt collection, it's always local, very specific. Say in Europe, it's a bit similar in each country, but still different. Like Latvia has many differences. If you think of like Asia, totally different.
Yeah.
And then investors can be on global scale, and actually that's also a situation. Usually investors have a problem actually to distribute money.
Yeah,
so
sure.
When they have such an ecosystem, it's easier also for them.
If you think of an investor, there's a lot of P2P lending now. And not just decentralized, but there's plenty of server-based, websites where you can just go and loan. What's your message to investors about why they should do it this way?
I think what we feel it's most important thing is trust. I mean, when you think about investing and lending, borrowing money, it's about the trust. And we personally have seen on those platforms that trust is really something that it's how you look at it. And sometimes no one checks what others are putting on the system, and no one understands if it's really like A plus loan or B minus loan or maybe even already bankrupt company. So that's what we solve. And their blockchain comes in quite nicely there.
Okay.
We can allow each individual service provider to do everything on blockchain, to record all their activities, record all their assessments and what they do. So it's trustworthy. It's always possible to check what's happening. To check background activity like trust rating from history.
How do you assess the risk? You're combining data from different sources. How does that all come together?
We, as the ecosystem, we don't assess risk. We connect existing or new service providers that are assessing risk.
Give me an example of how that works.
That works like, say a company comes want to borrow money, say the same invoice or any other type of loan. And then they buy service from another company. There are some credit score companies. For example, Credit Info is a company on a global level. There are local companies. And that company basically then scores the borrower, the lender, all the possible things. and they give a credit score.
Okay, so you're getting credit scores from third parties.
Yes.
So if I have a client who owes me money, and I know they're not going to pay me for 60 days, I can tell the platform about this company, and somehow the platform goes and gets that credit information.
Yes, and it's more in the very beginning. We think it will be more physical world approach. It will, of course, some integrations to databases, but it will, like every single third party, they can do it in the way they do it. There are the ones that do it manually, there are the ones that do it automatically, and there are ones that do it with artificial intelligence. So it doesn't really matter how you do it, as long as you put the answer back on.
And so, I guess if a company has a client and then sells his invoices, and so he can get the money quicker, are they often repeat customers? That it's often the case that their client is always late and they're always selling the invoices, or is it once in a while?
If discussing exactly invoice, it's usually 70-75% return. No, not return, but keep
coming back and doing it again.
Yes, and do it again. While before, and they do it as far as they become bankable.
Yeah.
And so in our experience, we have seen companies starting with like 4 people.
Yeah.
Getting
doing it,
and for like 6 months, and they have like 60 people, and then they become bankable.
So why wouldn't you just go to your vendor and say, I'm just going to go take a haircut on this anyway. I'm going to lose 5%. Why don't I give you the 5% and you pay me right now?
It happens sometimes.
That would make sense to me.
Yeah, on one hand it would, but many of those, say, retail chains or something, they actually try to work with.
They want to hold it.
Cash.
They don't want to give the discount. They want to hold the money.
That's where the margins very often come.
Yeah, sure. I understand. They use it for working capital. They don't care about the interest rate because the interest rate isn't very high. But they use the capital until the last minute.
Yes. But there have been also in our experience, there have been cases like that.
I expect. Sure.
Yeah, where we actually make all the work
and they just make a deal. Right.
And then we still have helped an SME, right? They still got the money faster. So.
Yeah, sure. Right. Yeah. I'm just using you as a threat is a really nice tool. So, okay, so tell me, how does it work with smart contracts and decentralization?
Okay, so with smart contracts, it works like that each of those counterparties, like a borrower, they have their own smart contract for the asset. That smart contract is used to collect all the investment in that contract. But others, like verification, risk assessment, they are linked smart contracts, a new smart contract that is linked to the initial one. That provide, for example, the score, the credit score, or
is that like an oracle that feeds in the credit score?
It's like say, if you are a risk assessor and I'm a borrower, so we make a smart contract, and I provide you payment in cryptocurrency, and you provide me the score.
Yes.
And so then that score is visible in the UI in the portal where investors are coming in.
Okay, so that's a separate thing. But does that tie into the lending smart contract, or that just helps you make the decision? It's separate.
It's linked. So in a way that if you look at the loan, which is that lending asset, then you can see all linked risk assessment contracts with the result. Because you can do one risk assessment, but you can also do couple.
Now, these invoices are not in cryptocurrency, so how would you put the invoice into the smart contract as collateral? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a good one. We do at the beginning because we think we are pragmatists, so we look at the world how it is, and all small business want fiat. So we do it in a way that it is hybrid. In a way that pay, like loan principals and interests move in fiat. So you need according paperwork, etc. in the very beginning. Later on, you can.
How does the smart contract know about the invoice, and what transfers the ownership of the invoice?
The ownership is actually okay. If you discuss in that way, that ownership actually stays with the ones that wrote it, but it's called the right to receive payment.
Okay.
Transferred.
Yes.
So, and how, because we do this in hybrid way,
Yeah.
that fiat money goes through additional service providers that we call fiat facilitator. And so basically that is a party, like you said, like an oracle, that puts in information that yes, we received investment fiat and we transferred the investment to the company. We received the fiat from the payer and it's like paid back.
So the payer is sent a note saying, here, now you pay to this account.
Yes.
And that's a third party. That's a third party who then transfers the money to the lender.
Yes, it is actually quite complicated.
I can imagine a bunch of fees in the middle of this.
There are currently a bunch, but one thing is that if we do it in a decentralized manner, then they are becoming smaller.
I mean, there are existing platforms for this. So what order of magnitude savings is there here? How much do you save versus? I don't know the name of an existing one, but how do you compare against an existing one?
We compare. At least our research, what we did, it's like at least 3 times cheaper the fee, because usually it's couple of percent.
Oh, the fee is 3 times. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the fee is 3 times cheaper. The interest rate it should be similar. Or
yeah, right.
It should be very similar.
Yeah.
Of course, if you have this trust-based records, trust rating based on smart contract activity, that is transparent and you can really trust it. Then, of course, in long run, you maybe will decrease interest rate for like trustworthy.
Right, and your fees will come down over time too because the machinery is all in place.
Exactly, but it takes time. It's a very
sure. Okay, so you're in 2 markets right now.
We are currently serving from Lithuania, but we are also having customers in like all around Europe and a couple in USA.
But you have to deal with the different laws in different countries.
And that's where the problem comes from.
Yeah.
That is really a problem. For example, to understand it is really time consuming.
Yeah.
We still deal with Lithuanian-based affiliates, so like companies, but sometimes their customers are outside. So we deal with that a little bit. And that's also where we have seen that, for example, for us to do it in like any other country, it is a lot of time consuming.
Yeah, because you have third parties, you have regulators, you have all this stuff that has to be done in each.
You have to know all the local things. So in essence, you have to become local.
Let me ask a question. The existing platforms right now that are on websites, are there a couple of those that are in many countries or across Europe or?
Yeah, there are a couple. I think there are actually 2 that are in 10 plus countries.
Yeah.
But most of them are actually really developed world, like UK, Germany, USA, France.
Yeah.
And only a couple of them are like in the places where actually you need, where there is a huge amount of credit gap for.
I see. All right. So you like the market of the smaller countries that are more underserved.
Yes.
Okay.
Because for example, in the same Lithuania, we are with 3 million. We are quite big, but we feel we can grow up to 20 in Lithuania alone in a couple of years. But when we started it was 3 years ago approximately. In the very beginning, when the first time you call a small company and you say, "Hey, there is a possibility for you to get money faster," they are like, what?
Yeah.
How?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
They don't understand.
Right. Right.
They are not thinking about it.
Yeah.
And you have to educate them.
Right. Sure.
Then you basically you have to create market.
Yeah. Right.
So that's how we look at it. That you have to create market and you have to create trust for investors to put money in that market.
It's also possible that if you go to a big market like the UK or Germany or France, you'll find a lot of small businesses that would like lower fees because lower fees are a big deal to them. To large companies, they want convenience. They don't mind so much. But there might be a lot of small businesses that are interested in a better deal.
Yeah, actually, that's true.
All right, tell us about, so you have an existing business. Is it profitable right now?
It was actually profitable from first month.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
And the reason, because it's not because it's so easy or something like that, but because we are very lean.
Yeah.
We are very
Yeah.
lean. And,
Right.
And actually, in the very beginning, we started the business very differently than others.
Yeah.
We thought of not investing in IT in the first hand, but we did it in parallel with business.
Mm-hmm.
So
Very good.
while others, for example, in Lithuania, were actually developing some solutions, we were actually serving customers. So we already got turnover and revenue.
Very
And then we were
good.
able
Very
to-
good. So you were doing a lot of it just by hand and with spreadsheets because you just want to get to market and engage with the market, right?
Yes, that was how we started, and I think that paid off, because now we are largest, or one of the top two, and many of those who were doing IT actually don't exist anymore.
So this is a big lesson that I try to teach entrepreneurs, and I've written a lot about it, and I have webinars on it. I call, one way you can do this is called prototyping, where you just put stuff in front of people that doesn't really work, but they see if they take it, because you've got to see if the dogs eat the dog food before you make the world's best dog food.
Exactly.
And this is a really important lesson for people to, this is what I call using hamster power. Just use people and do stuff behind the scenes and pretend you're software and get the job done and make customers happy, because it's going to keep changing. And when you find something that's repeatable, then you write the software, right?
Exactly.
And so not only did it get you going faster, but I'm willing to bet that it saved you a lot of changes. It's the changing that kills you in the software.
Exactly.
You can easily change your process with spreadsheets and hamster power. That's easy, right? So tell us about the changing and learning process with customers.
Yeah, I think that we were learning for a long time, actually, with a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, in the beginning we get many successful cases, but we still had to learn about risk. We changed risk assessment on the way.
Yeah.
At some stage, we understood that actually the biggest problem for failure, at least in our business, was not bad risk assessment, but was operational error.
You see,
And,
this is great for people to learn, because you could sit and make the perfect software and launch it into the market and lose it all because you don't have the process right.
Exactly, and I think that in all history we have had maybe one case where the risk assessment was kind of indicating good risk or low risk, and it was actually higher. But all the problems that we have had are mostly from operational.
Sure.
But it means that the customer makes an error, customer's customer makes an error.
Exactly.
And you have to come up with ways how to deal with that. You have to come up with extra verification steps.
Right.
We have learned a lot on verifications that in the beginning we thought we did, even though we actually came from finance background, we were not considering those steps that they're really so crucial. But only some year into the business we actually noticed.
So this is what I call putting the horse in front of the cart, because too many startups put the cart right in front of the horse. It's all about engineering and product, and they don't deal with the real world customers enough. So you're doing the right thing. You're going back and forth with when you find something that you can turn into software, you turn it into software, and you stay engaged with the customer the whole time.
Exactly.
Great.
And I think that's the reason why we are now thinking, when we talk about debitum, that's the reason why we think of financing process with many steps rather than just borrower and lender.
Yeah.
Because actually we see on the market that others are just thinking of borrower and lender because it looks like that from the first.
Right.
Kind of,
Right.
Put two together and everything happens.
Right.
But,
No.
but in reality, it is that you need other third parties, like you need risk assessment verification.
Right.
Otherwise, investor has to trust immensely in borrower.
Yeah.
Not to check if loan is actually true.
Yeah.
Actually, assets are there, etc.
Excellent. Okay. Very good. That's it's great that you learned that at your age. I learned that at about age 53, I think. So that's very good. So tell us about what is the role of the token in your system? Then you're going to have an ICO. What's that about?
Yeah, we'll have it will be called debitum token.
Yeah.
So what's the role of that? Basically, we looked actually with different models.
Mm-hmm.
So we came up with two values for the token. One is utility exchange, and another is toll. So as a utility exchange, we will all the payments for the service providers, like this verificator, insurance, risk assessment, debt collection.
Yes.
They will happen in our token.
Yes.
And based on the smart contract payments, some part automatically will be transferred to trust arbitrage smart contract that will calculate and update trust rating for each party. Meaning that based on if the transaction was successful, if you did it at all, what was the amount of the loan, etc., you will get points extra, like plus or minus in your trust rating. So that's kind of one thing.
But wait, this is a separate token, or?
No, it's the same token. Say I pay you, for example, 10 tokens. So 0.1 goes to trust smart contract, a separate smart contract.
That maintains the trust rating.
Yes.
Okay, so for example, if I do business with company XYZ and I give a trust rating, other people also doing business, they will give a trust rating. That accumulates in that smart contract.
Yes.
So and that can feed into the next loan.
Yes. So next time you come, you can see the trust rating. You can see basically what's the
right, and that helps determine the rate.
Yes, that helps to understand if can it be lower or should it be higher? Is it more riskier? Can you trust it? So
it's one token and it's the unit of exchange inside your system.
Yes.
It pays for all the extra stuff in your system, all the fees.
Yes. And another thing what it does, we freeze some of the tokens for service providers.
Mm-hmm.
And it is like a guarantee for future service quality. Basically, if you receive 10 tokens for what you do, say risk assessment, you freeze one token to make sure that if you do bad service later on, you can compensate it from those problems.
It's your deposit, right?
Yes, you kind of guarantee on top of your trust, you
right.
create a.
And so how do you know that the trust rating is any good?
It is yes, that's maybe most important part actually. We already have created, but we'll basically implement trust protocol, and it will be open, so everyone will be able to see how it's calculated, and it will calculate directly from other smart contracts. So it will be like objective. It will be objective.
Well, I guess the best answer, I think, is how do you know? It's that you try to get information from different independent sources.
Okay.
Right? So you don't rely on one. This was the problem in 2009. Everybody was relying on Standard & Poor's for rating risk, but they had every incentive to not do the right thing. So independent sources helps a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Right, not just the users, but also agencies or third parties, or however you can get independent data is very valuable.
No, we are thinking more of objective in a way that, based on the outcome of the loan, basically. So basically,
yeah, right. Well, that's on the system. The problem is that 98% of the business is not done on your system. And so the credit rating comes from somewhere in the real world, more or less. So you want, if you can harvest it from anywhere else, big data, social media, anything can help construct a composite credit score.
Yeah.
Right.
True.
And there's actually some interesting software companies that are doing just that. They're looking at social media and helping to concentrate data around particular companies. Let me ask quickly, how much are you planning to raise and when?
We are starting our ICO on November 30th.
Yeah.
So the final day of November.
Yeah.
Soft cap is it's actually, we want to raise quite a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
The soft cap is 50,000 Ether. and hard cap is 200,000 ETH.
And why? Why so much money?
Yes, why so much money? Because based on experience, basically we have created the plan for 50 countries worldwide based on World Bank. And we have created it in a way that we have a detailed business plan, how we go region by region, country by country in that region, starting from our home market, Europe, and then like Southeast Asia, Asia, South America, Central America, South Africa, etc. to make it global. And we have calculated it for every region, how much is needed, basically like detailed calculations. So how we look at it is that the hard cap, if we manage to raise it, then we can just not think about funding anymore and just do business and implement. But in reality, how we look at it from other side. We look at it in that way that soft cap is something that is needed to build market in our home market, basically Europe, Central Eastern Europe, and a bit around. And that's not mostly that covers development, total development of the application. It mostly covers business development in the countries. Because what we
you have to get the word out, of course.
Yes, we need to get word out, and we need to contact different third-party providers, borrowers, investors, everything, and that takes business development. But we want to do it in a way that it's community-based, and we hope that once we push it through to some level, then the community can take over and grow it organically without any further need of business development. But if we will get more trust from community and we'll able to raise more, then we straight away move to further regions. If not, then we just concentrate on the regions that we get the funding for.
Okay, I want to talk about this in further shows because you're a good entrepreneur. You're really engaging with the market and doing what you need as you need it. Now you're asking for $40 million at the top end, $10 to $40 million, and you know yourself that if you just go incrementally and stay engaged with the market and just keep ahead of the market, you don't need a ton of money in the bank. You'll be more lean and you'll probably be more successful. You will not win the world over with $40 million. You will win the world over with agile service and listening to customers, right?
Yes.
I
understand it, but we also understand that we also know how we did it in here in Lithuania. It took us how much it costed.
Well, you could do it in stages. I'm going to talk more. I don't have time now, but I'm going to talk more. You could sell $5 to $10 million worth now. Keep your tokens. Do a great job. Show everybody you're doing it. You're taking it to the next level and even 2 levels for that much money. And then you have another token sale and at a higher valuation and you raise more money. So why should we give it all to you? That increases risk. Also, you now have to return much more to give us a good return. If you do a small amount early, I'm interested in investing because I know that if you can do that one thing in 1 or 2 countries, you're going to be worth then $50 million. Now, the next time you raise, everybody's going to be putting in money for those tokens at a much higher multiple than I put in. And otherwise, if not, if I have to do the whole thing now I have to wait until you're worth $500 million to get a decent return.
We think in a similar way. We just think in a way that if we have the trust, we have it. If no, then we will actually.
Well, this is unfortunately the kind of gravy train thinking. Everybody's if we have the traffic, why should we turn it away? Why don't we just keep raising money? And I'm telling you, you will get more natural buyers if you say we're raising 5 to 10 million than if you're saying we're shooting for the moon. And all that appreciation is built into the price of the token now, because you will have to be a superstar to make those tokens worth 10 times more, and you're increasing risk of failure by shooting higher if you just take one step at a time. So this is called staged fundraising. And we're going to talk a lot more about it. I'm going to talk a lot more about it. I think it's something I want you to think about. I have to run right now, and I really appreciate your time, because I'm convinced, Mārtiņš, that with even $5 million, you know what to do with it, and you can build a successful business here. And on top of that, you can continue to grow and do great things.
I believe in that too.
Okay, I believe in you. I think you're a great guy. You've got the right methodology. Don't break it. Keep taking many small steps and stay with customers.
Okay.
Cool.
Super.
Great. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Okay. Now, don't forget our sponsors are the Pillar Project, coming out with the ICO wallet next year, and 2030, a community of blockchain innovators. If you have any comments or suggestions, please please email the ICO Show at gmail.com. And my producer Ash wants me to remind you that you should ring the bell and do thumbs up and make comments and nice things and everything. And you know what? Do that if you want to, but if you don't, that's fine. I don't care. And don't forget, this is not investment advice. I don't own any of the tokens. I'm not planning to buy these ICOs. Always consult a qualified statistician before you make any investment advice. Your investment advisor doesn't know anything about investing. I'm David Siegel for the ICO Show. Stay safe out there.